evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The top down, your foot on the gas, the wind in your hair. Driving as American as, well, nothing actually is more American than driving. It's our birthright. It's both a joy and a necessity when your country spans a continent. But is it about to end abruptly? Driverless cars are coming, maybe sooner than we think they are. And what are the ramifications exactly? And by the way, what happens to the millions of Americans who drive cars and trucks for a living? There are at least 4 million of them. Joining us now is one of the foremost experts on this subject, Hod Lipson. He's a roboticist, a mechanical engineering professor at Columbia in New York, and the author of Driverless, Intelligent Cars and the Road Ahead. Hod, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it. I think
my pleasure.
This is a really interesting topic and a cool topic, and driverless cars are a marvel, I think. But I think anyone who ponders it for a minute starts to feel concern for the millions of Americans who drive for a living. So what will happen to them?
Well, I think there's you have to look at the big picture and realize that what we're about to experience is a transformation to transportation as a whole. So we're going to have a lot more cars being driven, a lot more traffic, and a lot more production of cars. So the industry as a whole is going to grow in a big way. We're going to have a lot more car manufacturing, a lot more mechanics jobs, a lot more jobs for maintenance of roads. So overall, we're going to see, I think, an expansion. But it's true that some jobs are probably going to go away, not completely, and driving is one of them, for sure.
Well, so that's not a small thing, though. I mean, this is not buggy whip manufacturing. According to the census, driving commercially, either delivery or trucks, is the single most common job in the majority of states. I think 29 out of 50 states. It's number one and it's number two in a bunch of others. So this is a huge disruption of a massive part of the labor force. And I know you've thought a lot about the technology behind this. Who's thinking about what happens to those people? What exactly are they going to do you think?
Well, you know, I agree with you. And part of the reason we wrote this book was to sort of get people to start thinking about driverless cars in a big way, to understand the ripple effect of this technology. It's not just technology itself. It's not just about to replace, cab drivers. It's really it has a ripple effect on the economy from lots of jobs, but also growth in many sectors of the job. So I think what's going to happen is that many of these drivers will have to start looking for other jobs. But unlike other transformations that involve the growth in, let's say, software industry at the expense of other industries, what we're going to see here is expansion of the entire industry. We're going to see a lot of more jobs in factories, in manufacturing cars, in taking care of roads and so forth. So I think overall it's going to be a net benefit, but there's going to be some adjustments to be made.
Well, I mean, there are going to be massive adjustments, and I guess that's my concern. So a lot of people are thinking about this. A lot of for-profit companies are involved. The government is subsidizing it, as you know, both directly and in road maintenance. And the main point is, of course, to save on labor costs, because that's a huge part of the cost for a lot of these businesses. This is very much a market-driven idea. Who is sitting and thinking seriously about what these people are going to do? Or is it a kind of a faith-based assumption that they'll be fine and that other parts of the economy will expand and they'll be taken up there? I mean, is there anyone who's really plotting this out? Because it's happening soon, as you've pointed out.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has actually plotted out the precise path, but the assumption is, and I think it's going to happen, is that we're going to see overall a growth in the economy because of this. So it's a little bit like what the internet did for communication. What driverless cars are going to do for transportation is really expand the entire economy, allow a lot of new opportunities, new kinds of businesses that we enabled, and again, new kinds of manufacturing jobs. So overall, it's going to be an expansion. But I agree. I share your concern.
Well, it might actually do what the internet did for bookstores, which just destroy them forever. And, there's an upside, of course, also. The problem is it's not just any 4 million people, and that's at the very low end because there are lots of ancillary businesses attached to driving, as you well know. But it's high school educated men in rural areas. So if you look at the states where driving is the biggest occupation, they tend to be far from our economic centers. So there are already places with high unemployment, especially among men. Women work at the schools, the hospitals, but the men don't have a lot of full-time work other than driving. And that causes massive social dislocation. You wind up a lot of people on disability, a lot of people on unemployment. I mean, there are going to be social ramifications. Again, I just ask you the same question a third time. Who's thinking about that?
Yeah, so right now I don't have a good answer. And again, this is why we wrote the book, is to sort of basically highlight this issue. It's coming sooner than you think. It's coming,
right.
It's going to happen in the next decade. And it's something that we have to start thinking about. What happens with these jobs, but also, I want to point out all the other things, the thousands of lives that are going to be saved, and again, the new economy that's going to grow out of it. And my hope is that a lot of these drivers will find jobs that are suitable for them in these other sectors of the industry that will grow. And again, it's not just growth in the software industry where it's difficult to see how these drivers will find employment. These are growth in other industrial manufacturing sectors that I think can absorb these drivers with their skills.
Well, God bless you for not telling me that they're all going to become software coders, which is the normal response from the tech community, and it's infuriatingly stupid. Thank you for acknowledging reality here. So 2 questions. So the government's subsidizing this. Why? Why would government be subsidizing what is obviously a job killer? And 2, why is this inevitable exactly? I mean, the tech companies don't own the roads. The public does. And the government could shut this down tomorrow. DOT could say no. And why shouldn't they if there's a massive social cost attached? And we don't know the consequences. You've conceded that.
Right. I think it would be a bad move to shut it down, because it will happen in the rest of the world. I can tell you, I get phone calls all the time from analysts from other countries saying, what can we do to get this whole energy around driverless car to happen in our country? What does our DOT need to do to allow autonomous driving to develop in our country? So right now, it's all happening in the U.S. It's a wonderful thing because we'll be able to sort of spearhead this thing. Just like the internet happened here first, it created a transformation to the entire planet. But a lot of the big companies in this area are all here. And I think we want the same thing to happen in the U.S. when it comes to driverless cars. We want the first driverless cars to appear here. We want to have the big businesses around this evolve here. And we want to sort of lead the world in this area. So if we don't do it, somebody else will do it.
Maybe not, but you can pardon my skepticism when it seems like all the benefits go to well-educated, affluent urban elites like me, and probably you, who don't want to drive anyway, we live in cities, and kind of shafts the middle of the country, and that the pretext for this is safety, as it often is. Highway safety deaths are the lowest point in 100 years. I mean, I graduated from high school in 1987. Right. They were twice what they are today. We don't have driverless cars yet. The numbers are going down. So to say this is all about safety when it's really about saving businesses on labor costs, a little insulting, no?
No. I think, first of all, last year the car fatalities went up by 8% because of distracted driving, and I think this will continue to go up. We have 30,000 fatalities a year in the U.S. That's a huge number. That's just fatalities, not counting people who can't think or walk after a car accident. So safety for sure is a good reason. But again, I'm pretty sure that the economy will grow once we have this transformation. We'll have new business models. We'll have decongested cities. We'll have a lot of people spend enormous amount of time commuting to work and back.
Right.
All that time could be saved. They can rest and maybe spend more time with the family when they come home instead of being exhausted. I mean, the benefits are tremendous. Now, it's true.
Yeah, they might be. But wouldn't you also concede that, like, when jobs leave your town, the death rate goes up from OxyContin ODs and cirrhosis and obesity and all the kinds of slow forms of suicide that accompany mass unemployment. So, like, that's not a concern too?
Yeah, it is a concern, and I think the bigger picture is what we're seeing is that artificial intelligence, automation, robotics is sort of taking away jobs in a more general pattern, not just in driving, but in factories. Yeah. And we'll see that happening more and more. So the bigger question is, what do we do balancing automation, artificial intelligence, which increase productivity per se? How do we balance that with job loss? And that's a very important question. And that's a question that we need to look at from a sort of economics point of view.
You think? Because I can tell you this, that nobody in my world cares at all. And God bless you for at least raising the question, because nobody in rich person world has given it a single thought, and they really ought to.
This is a very important question. Yeah, and I'm glad we're talking about it.
Amen. We're out of time, unfortunately. Thanks a lot for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, down in Mar-a-Lago, President-elect Trump has put together his communications team, but that's not the only news coming out of the transition today. A lot has happened, and of course, Peter Doocy has every last detail. He's in Palm Beach. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Tucker, and the president-elect from Mar-a-Lago is already following up with one of the CEOs that he met with yesterday, using social media to tell Lockheed Martin, who he has famously complained about as constantly going over budget with government contracts, that he is ready to move on. He tweeted this earlier today. Based on the tremendous cost and cost overruns of the Lockheed Martin F-35, I have asked Boeing to price out a comparable F-18 Super Hornet. Now, remember yesterday, the Boeing CEO was there at Mar-a-Lago too. He spoke to reporters, said that Air Force One is going to cost less than Mr. Trump thought, and that was seen as a good thing. The Lockheed Martin CEO, though, who was at Mar-a-Lago, never came to the cameras. Mr. Trump spoke instead. He said he thought he may be able to get the cost of that F-35 down, but that Lockheed Martin had some good negotiators on their side, too. Another big development tonight, we now know who is going to stand at a podium in the Brady briefing room to defend the president-elect's policies and get peppered with questions by reporters every day. It's Sean Spicer, the former RNC communications head who has worked very closely alongside the next White House chief of staff, Reince Priebus, at the RNC for years, which means the outsider president is about to have two veteran GOP operatives in key posts within his White House. Today, the president-elect also elevated a trio of other communications staffers to key jobs. Hope Hicks, who is almost always by the president-elect's side and worked in his personal office before the campaign was announced, is moving to Washington. Jason Miller, who joined the campaign after initially working this cycle for Ted Cruz, is going to work in a Trump White House, and so will Dan Scavino, who's been running the very popular and very visible social media accounts and will continue to work in Washington in a similar capacity. Shortly before these announcements were made, Ivanka Trump was getting berated in front of her children in the coach cabin of a commercial airliner by somebody who disagrees with her dad's policies so much that he couldn't keep it together in front of her 3 children or the young child that he was apparently holding. JetBlue kicked the aggressive air traveler off of that flight, but says that they later rebooked him on a later one. Tucker?
Wow. Manners in decline. Peter, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Well, the state of New York has decided to regulate who sleeps over at your place. A newly passed bill bans people from renting out their apartments on sites like Airbnb for fewer than 30 days. The question is why? Interests are competing. Which is the most important? Joining us now is New York State Senator Liz Krueger. She co-sponsored the bill. Senator, thanks a lot for coming on tonight.
My pleasure.
So I think most people kind of assume they have a right to decide who spends the night at their place. Why don't they?
Well, if you're living in your own place and you want to rent out part of it, say the bedroom, or you want to sleep on the couch and rent out your bedroom, that's fine. This is the issue of renting out apartments intended for residential use to other people as quote-unquote illegal hotel rooms.
Okay, but I'm sort of missing the distinction. If it's my place, if it's not my place, it's between me and the landlord, not you in the state of New York. But if it's my place, why shouldn't I be allowed to have anyone I want over on whatever terms I choose?
Again, if it's a single-family home, a double-family home, fine. But if it's an apartment, it's not your place. It's the landlord who owns the place, and your neighbors have rights also. So you're not allowed to have people come and move in without your being there for less than 30 days. That's the law. That's actually been the law since 2011.
Right. No, I know it's, but sometimes it's worth reassessing why we have these laws. You know, go up the mental attic, see what's up there. You know, is it still worth having? So my sense is that the complaints are not coming from neighbors so much. That can be handled more locally than statewide, but from the hospitality industry that sees a threat from Airbnb and sites like it. They're giving a ton of money to politicians. I don't know if you've taken any money from them, but lots of others have, because they don't want competition. Right?
No, actually, my complaints come from my constituents, the people who live in these buildings, the 80-year-old woman who says there are strangers with keys coming in and out of my building. I'm scared. People who say our children can't run around the hallways anymore because we don't know who's coming in and out. Landlords who say I'm trying to stop this and I can't get my arms around it. So, in fact, the complaints that drove the legislation I passed in 2010 and the complaints that drove the legislation that just passed this year, increasing fines, has been driven by real-life people living in apartments here in New York City.
Well, you make an entirely fair point, I have to say. I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like that either at all.
And so, we have people who've put their life savings into buying a condominium, moving their families in, and suddenly discover that somebody has set up an illegal hotel arrangement in the apartments around them. You know, there's a reason why there are different standards for hotels. Increased security, more levels of egress to come and go, higher fire standards, because there's more people coming and going. Residential buildings aren't designed for this purpose. And of course, as more and more units come off the market in a city like New York, where we're desperate for affordable housing, it's actually having the impact of raising everybody's rents and making it tougher for people who live here to find some place to live.
Okay, so that's where you lost me. I have to say, you kind of convinced me on the first part. I didn't expect to be won over, but you won me over. But on the cost of living in New York City, that is a lot your fault. I mean, rent control makes apartment space more scarce than it would otherwise be. And I don't know a single person with a rent-controlled apartment in New York City who's not rich. So it's not helping the poor, and you know that because you live on the Upper East Side.
No, actually, if you look at the data, first off, rent control is a very small program at this point. It's only people who've been in apartments since basically before 1974. Rent stabilized is the bigger universe. The average household in rent stabilized is earning about $32,000 a year. It's not the rich. And there's not one apartment that's been built since 1974 under rent stabilization where the landlord developer said, I want to be in the program. They don't have to be. They chose to be to get tax reductions.
Okay, but you know, right, so the public's subsidizing this. But you know as well as I know the neighborhood you live in. You know affluent people who live in rent-controlled or rent-stabilized apartments. You know, I know you do, because everybody does in New York City. And that's totally unfair, and it does make everyone else's rent go up. And so why not get rid of that? Because it doesn't help.
It's a separate question than the Airbnb question.
It is a separate question, but you raise scarcity.
Fair enough.
So,
and scarcity has lots of answers and solutions. In a perfect world, would we have the model of rent regulation? No. But in a city where over 1 million people who would have nowhere else to go would actually end up losing their apartments if we did away with rent regulation, that's not an option for us. We need to preserve affordable housing, which includes not allowing Airbnb illegal hoteling to take apartments off the market. We need to try to build more affordable housing throughout the 5 boroughs, but none of this is going to get done overnight, and illegal hoteling is just making it worse.
Yeah, and more jobs that aren't necessarily in finance or the service industry might help too. But you kind of got me. If I was living in an apartment building and all of a sudden there are a bunch of randoms with keys on the hallway, I wouldn't like it either. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much,
That was interesting.
Tucker.
Now it's time for Twitter Storm, the nightly forecast of social media's most intense weather patterns. It was a stormy day on Twitter today. Ivanka Trump got it off to a rough start. She showed up at JFK today, the airport, and got on to a JetBlue flight flying in coach. Twitter user Matt Lasner wrote this: Ivanka and Jared flying commercial. My husband chased them down to harass them, this man wrote. Well, his husband went on to do just that. TMZ reported that he verbally berated the future first daughter in front of her kids on board the flight, in front of a whole bunch of people. So Twitter had mixed reactions, according to political party, not surprisingly. Joe Matar, like to who he is, tweeted this: I support the verbal harassment of Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump, and everyone else related to the Trump family or administration. I bet you $1,000 Joe Matar describes himself as a tolerant, open-minded person, but he reveals otherwise on Twitter. Adam Neal wrote this: Ivanka Trump flies JetBlue, ? A question that many had today. Yes, apparently she does. The recovering liberal tweeted this: liberals who are class warriors are triggered because someone like Ivanka Trump travels on a commercial airline. Let that sink in. Whoa. Like a Zen koan, meditate on that. Jeff B. wrote this: love Trump's hate. They go low, we go higher. Remember that? Ryden Daniel tweeted, I'm a liberal, and what happened to Ivanka Trump is disgusting. She is not her father. Don't harass random people. Yeah, get that tattooed on your arm, Joe Matar. Mesmer wrote this: Ivanka Trump, please put Matt Lasner and his lunatic husband on the no-fly list. They don't know how to behave in public. Tom Shattuck wrote, Matt Lasner proud of himself for accosting a mom with her kids. Fascist left exposing itself. And finally, Bill wrote, as Matt Lasner, I thought the GOP was waging a war on women, but I guess it's the intolerant liberals like you. Ha ha ha. By the way, TMZ reports that Ivanka landed in San Francisco, switched over to a private plane. Apparently it was prearranged, had nothing to do with the incident on JetBlue. That's tonight's Twitter Storm. Coming up next, did the CNN anchor help make a racially divisive hoax go viral on the internet? It certainly looks that way. We're going to have details coming up. Also, the suspect in the Berlin Christmas market massacre is still at large, on the run. Americans fear a similar attack could happen here. How did this happen? Sebastian Gorka has some answers. Up next. Well, a video went viral yesterday of two men being kicked off a Delta flight, allegedly for speaking in Arabic. That was their claim. There's some problems with the story, though. First up, one of the men is a YouTube prankster known for these types of pranks designed to show how racist Americans are. Another problem, Delta and other passengers on the plane dispute the story vehemently. As we noted, that video went everywhere on the internet yesterday and was swallowed whole by virtually everyone in the press because it confirmed their suspicions that America, outside of Washington, New York, and LA, is racist and retrograde, but partly because CNN media critic Brian Stelter retweeted it without checking to see if it was true. Joining us now is Joe Concha. He's a media reporter at The Hill newspaper, and he's been following this since the beginning. So, Joe, I was a little confused by this because I'm familiar with who Brian Stelter is. I've known him since he was in college, actually. And he's the guy always jumping up and down about how other news organizations are irresponsible, and before you tweet something out, you ought to check and double check. That's journalism, double checking to make certain it's true. He seems like he had a hand in disseminating a hoax.
I'll have to correct you there, Tucker. Actually, the quote is on one of his shows a couple of weeks ago, "We need a new rule for the web. Triple check before you share." Now, if you do a 10-second Google search on who Adam Saleh is, this prankster that you just outlined, it would show that he does this sort of thing. He's a professional hoaxer, and he's done this with airlines before. So the source is already highly questionable. And when somebody like Brian Stelter sends out that sort of video, shares it without context as to who this person is, it gives the story legs, it gives it legitimacy, it helps it go viral more, and most importantly, it basically is hurting American businesses because trending on Twitter yesterday, Tucker, was boycott Delta. You had celebrities like Olivia Wilde saying, never fly this airline again. So, you know, I've never quoted Winston Churchill on a cable news show before. I'm about to do it now. He said that a lie can go halfway around the world before the truth even gets its pants on. So by Stelter sending this out, even if the story is debunked, it's impossible to put the toothpaste back in the tube. This has already hurt Delta, maybe irreparably.
Well, and by the way, I mean, this is, if you had just, as you noted, just check this guy for 1 second on Google, it really was like Tawana Brawley accusing you of assault. I mean, maybe it's true, but the source is so discredited that you would never retweet it. By the way, let's just put up, in case our viewers haven't seen it, this is a performance from Brian Stelter on fake news, one of his favorite topics. Here we go.
Fake news has become a plague on the web, and especially on social networks like Facebook. There are so many unreliable sources about this election. So we need a new rule for the web. Triple check before you share.
So this is the guy who told us that there were hundreds of swastikas being painted on buildings after Trump got elected. This is a guy who spent a year flacking for Hillary Clinton. I was convinced he wanted to be her press secretary. How does he get, and that's fine, he's got a political point of view, he's a progressive, he's an activist. How does he get to pose as a media critic on a purportedly nonpartisan news station?
Yeah, let me give you that quote first, Tucker, because I found it remarkable. He said about Trump supporters 6 days after Trump was elected, "We are seeing hundreds of swastikas, hundreds, racist language, harassment, or in some cases, assault or bullying across the country." Now, this has been disproven completely. No one can verify anything around hundreds of swastikas or hundreds of people getting beaten around the country. Did Brian Stelter apologize? No. Did he retract? No. Was there any accountability from management? No. You have inmates running the asylum, and that's the problem here. So, you know, I say a New Year's resolution, Tucker. Basically, journalists that purport to be straight news reporters, like you had Kurt Eichenwald on last week. You proved him to be an advocate. Brian Stelter should do the same thing, change the name of his show on Sundays from Reliable Sources to Countdown with Brian Stelter and say our mission is to call out conservative media bias while taking on Trump at every turn, and people will respect the fact that he is being transparent.
That's exactly right. It wouldn't bother me. It's like NPR. If they would just stop pretending to be unbiased, I'd probably listen to it because at least it's honest. Last quick question. CNN has not responded. I mean, this seems like the irony of a guy who decries fake news, disseminating fake news. But have they retracted his tweet? Have they apologized for it? Have they corrected the record at all?
You can go on Twitter right now to Brian Stelter's account, and you will see that tweet is still up, doing damage. People are still retweeting it out, and Stelter is standing by it, saying that he was only trying to point out the virality, how viral it was going. But again, he didn't provide any context around that tweet, and that does damage to Delta Airlines, and that's why fake news in this context is dangerous. It hurts American business, Tucker.
That's a good point. Thanks a lot, Joe. I appreciate it. Joining us now, the singers and the songwriters you just saw, the ones who wrote that updated version, Lydia Liza and Josiah Lemansky. Lydia, Josiah, thanks a lot for joining us.
Tucker.
Hey,
Yeah, thank you for having
great
us.
voices, and I listened to your song about 5 times. You're obviously really talented. What was wrong with the original version? Why not just sing that? It seems a little better to me. Why didn't you?
Yeah, the original version, we don't, I mean, it's fine. We do like the original version as well. The thing is just that listening to it in our generation's context is definitely different from the 1940s context.
Yeah.
It sounds different to different ears.
So what do you mean by that? Sounds different is not good in this case, I have the feeling. Or you wouldn't have rewritten it.
Well, we rewrote it just as like a fun thing to do between us.
Yeah.
We weren't necessarily offended by the first version. We just were listening through it and we were like, that doesn't sound so great when you take all the music away and the history of it. Today it sounds pretty creepy.
Pretty creepy. So, but I mean, you're young
Yeah.
people. You live in the modern world. You hear hip hop and rap. I mean, explicit references to rape, encouragement to rape is really common.
Yeah.
In that music. Do you ever
It's
rewrite
true.
any of it?
Yeah.
Have you rewritten any
No,
Lil
I mean-
Wayne or anything?
No,
No.
and we're completely aware of that too.
Yeah.
But again, it wasn't necessarily like an attack on anything.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
more just fun, and it seemed contextual because it's Christmas time and the song was on the radio a lot. And we don't agree with those types of lyrics at all in other
Right.
songs like that. We don't condemn that at all. But I guess we weren't really out to change the whole world on this. We were
Yeah, or get rid of the original at all. We
Right.
just wanted to update it to new ears. We did it on purpose. I mean, we were trying to be like militant and funny about it. It was, especially the part where he says you reserve the right to say no twice.
Yeah,
We realized
no one's going to say that in a regular conversation, and we know that. It is-
But what do I know? I'm 47.
that would be weird.
Yeah, but does it seem
Yeah.
like we're in the middle? I mean, it's always important, I think, to remember that we're in an era, no matter where we're living or when, we're in a moment, and that maybe our current
Yeah.
moment is a moral panic of a sort, where people are very easily offended, and a Twitter, and there's a lot of pearl clutching going on about this or that offensive statement.
Yeah.
Do you feel that? Would you notice that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. In the PC cops kind of stuff, like that really is going on right now, and people are offended because we're trying to have so many conversations at once with like the
Right.
oversaturation of media and stuff. So it's hard to focus on one thing at a time, and so everybody
Right.
gets upset about a lot of things at once because there's a ton to be upset
yeah,
about.
a lot of information.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, all kinds of traditional children's songs, if you look at them through the lens that a lot of people are looking at this song through, it's easy to get offended. I mean, Yankee Doodle Dandy has a line in there about "with the girls be handy." Is that adding to rape culture, do you think? Or Mary Had a Little Lamb, is that insensitive, do you think, to the animal rights people? Does it feel that way?
I wouldn't necessarily say that that's offensive or that's promoting rape, but I think it can't hurt to just update it. Update it to a different song if you want to. Let's just kind of have some fun with it.
Yeah.
So like Yankee Doodle
we-
got the girl's consent before getting handy with her, sort of thing?
No,
Yeah,
not necessarily,
no.
but I mean, it's kids. Everyone's afraid of what the kids are listening to, and they want to make sure that they're
Right.
listening to good, wholesome stuff. And
Yeah.
sometimes
Right.
it can be taken differently than how other kids take it. So making one updated version as just an example of, a good example of a respectful conversation, or the correct way to
Right.
do something couldn't necessarily hurt.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the song Frere Jacques, right?
Yeah.
No, Frere Jacques.
Yes.
I mean, there's a line in there where he's asleep and the morning bells are ringing and he doesn't wake up, and I'm feeling like, well, maybe that's a little insensitive to narcoleptics. Does that feel that way to you at all?
That was really funny.
No.
No.
Okay, good. Just a test. I just want to see we're on the same page.
I didn't even know
Josiah,
that.
it's great to see you. And as much as I'm making
Yeah.
fun of this because I think it needs to be made fun of, you're obviously really talented, and I appreciate your coming on.
Thank you so much, Tucker.
Thanks,
We really
Tucker.
appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, the Berlin terror attack is causing new terror fears here in the U.S. So what is being done to keep us safe? And what did the Germans do wrong, if anything? That's next. Fox News alert, a massive international manhunt still underway at this hour for the suspect who plowed a truck into a Berlin Christmas market, murdering 12 people and injuring dozens more, including 2 Americans. The suspect is a 24-year-old Tunisian who was known to U.S. intelligence agencies, reportedly was on the American no-fly list. The rampage is Germany's worst terror attack in decades and has reignited fears that similar attacks could happen throughout Europe and here in the United States. Here now is terror expert and author of Defeating Jihad, Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, thanks a lot for joining us.
Absolutely, Tucker.
So how did this happen? What's the macro answer to that?
How did it happen? It's not the police.
Right.
It's the politicians. The security services knew this guy was a bad guy. That's why he's on our list to no fly.
Yes.
He was convicted of arson in Italy, spent 4 years in prison. He has a record for assault. He is known to be associated with ISIS. There's some statements he's made. There is sympathy towards jihadi ideology. And this guy was meant to be deported from Germany. But the Tunisians, where he came from, said, no, we don't want him. You can keep him. So the political decision was he is to be released.
Well, this happens in the United States all the time, where we attempt to deport someone and the country of origin says, no thanks, we're not interested either, and the person remains here. So, I mean, at some point there's going to be a political backlash to this, right? Nobody thinks this is the last terror attack that's going to take place in Germany.
There has to be some kind of response. The politicians have to pay the price for this. This is going to happen again and again and again. Remember, we've had Nice, we've had Brussels, we've had Paris twice. Just now there's breaking news in Australia. They foiled the largest plot in Australia planned for Christmas Day. This war is global, it's America, it's international, and it is going to increase.
But if you let people into your country who hate you, why would you be surprised when they act against you? And why do our elites think that statement is so controversial and offensive?
The question is, do you allow ideology to trump national security? And that's what these politicians have said, right? Multiculturalism is more important than being safe when you go to the Christmas market in Berlin. That's really what they're saying.
And there's no evidence the public agrees in any country.
No, I mean, look, Brexit, in my opinion, is a response to this. The Trump train is a response to this. We reject multiculturalism and moral relativism. We want to have sovereignty. We want to have borders. The wall is an expression of common sense national security measures.
That's right. So just to be clear, there's a distinction between multiculturalism, which is unsustainable, lots of cultures at war with each other, and a multi-ethnic society, which is entirely
absolutely
great,
American.
Right, exactly.
Correct.
But the idea that we have to sit and allow people to come in who hate our culture and we're not allowed to say anything about it, is that a new idea?
Tolerance of intolerance is suicide for a nation. Right?
Yes.
Either a nation, the word nation means something and has content, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you let everybody in, including those who wish to destroy what you historically stood for. Because Europe has lost this battle, really. I mean, this is why Brexit occurred. What does Europe stand for today? Does it stand for Christendom? Does it stand for Western civilization? I'd probably say probably not.
Interesting. So there was another apparently plot foiled in Australia. Tell us the scope of that.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister just made an announcement very recently. He used the interesting phrase, a multimodal attack. So probably synchronized different methods of violence were plotted, multiple arrests, an Egyptian and other national, Lebanese, 4 Lebanese, 1 Egyptian as well. And they have stated this is the largest plot they have intercepted in Australia since 9/11.
And it was plotted for Christmas Day.
For Christmas Day, Tucker.
Are authorities here concerned?
Absolutely. They have to be. Why? Look at in the UK, in Europe, we now have armed police with automatic weapons protecting creches, nativity scenes. What does that tell you? Whether or not we like it, this is a religious war. Why? Because at least one side of it has declared war on a religion, Christianity.
Yes.
ISIS, on its recent issue of Dabiq, their magazine, their English jihadi magazine, called that issue Break the Cross, and they had a photograph of a jihadi on top of a church pulling down the cross off the roof. It doesn't get more explicit than that.
No, it really doesn't. Ask any of the Israelis who've recently moved from France. Whether they think it's a religious war. And of course they know it is, which is why they left. Dr. Gorka, thanks a lot for coming on.
Merry Christmas.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, you've seen correspondent Mike Tobin for years out on the streets during protests, but did you know he'd much rather be on the top of a mountain? How do you know that? Because he just was on the top of the tallest mountain in the Americas. He has survived. He joins us in the Friend Zone next. Time now for the Friend Zone, where we invite our friends within the building here at Fox onto the show. Tonight we're joined by Mike Tobin, someone you have watched for years on television. He's in our Chicago bureau. I know Mike. I had no idea what an amazing and very accomplished outdoorsman he is. You just climbed one of the tallest mountains in the world I can't pronounce it. It's in Argentina. It's the tallest mountain in the Americas.
Aconcagua. It's the tallest mountain in the Americas, highest peak outside of the Himalayas.
So I looked it up. It's known to the locals as the Mountain of Death because so many people have died on it, 90 people, including a bunch of Americans pretty recently. What's it like?
Well, there is a whole graveyard down at the bottom for people who didn't take the mountain seriously. And mountaineers and people around climbing generally do tend to give pretty dramatic names to the different mountains. When I climbed the Eiger, you had to climb up Murder Face and climb past the Death Bivouac. This particular mountain is not that technically challenging in terms of there's not a lot of vertical drop, but what you have is severe altitude. You get up to just about 23,000 feet by the end. So you start thinking about cruising altitude of jets, and you're getting pretty close. So what you're really battling with is acclimatization, and that's particularly why I chose this mountain. I wanted to go see how my body did above 20,000 feet. And so far, so good. It worked out pretty well. I climbed with a guy named Gaspar Navarrete. He was strong as a bull moose, and we knocked out the summit. We burned all of our bad weather days. The mountain threw everything at us that it possibly could. We had windstorms, snowstorms, avalanches, everything but flying monkeys. But we were able to summit on our last possible day.
So at 23,000 feet, people die and have died, a number of them on that mountain, from pulmonary or cerebral edema, from not handling the altitude. You can't really know, can you, whether that's going to hit you?
Well, you can try to do things smart by going gradually into the altitude. And also what I did ahead of time, I've got this weirdo Michael Jackson-ish tent that was delivered to my house, and we started reducing the oxygen in my bed about the month before I went to climb and got up to about 12,000 feet, and then we went up to base camp at 14,000 feet. I really didn't have many problems with the altitude, and part of the effect of the bad weather is we got pinned down in certain camps, and that slowed down our progress and more gradually introduced me to the altitude on this climb.
I don't mean to laugh at you because I know it's serious and you could die if you screwed it up, but you set up an oxygen deprivation tent in your apartment?
Well, my house, yeah, but my girlfriend called it the Michael Jackson tent. Well, the neighbors, they don't come into the bedroom. My girlfriend thought it was weird, and she poked a lot of fun at me. But essentially, what you do is you force poor quality oxygen into your bed while you're sleeping, and that makes your body start kicking out red blood cells. The interesting thing is now that I'm back at a regular altitude, it's kind of hard to breathe. The air feels a little bit oppressive. I got so used to the extreme altitude, and when you come back, you'd think you'd be supercharged. It would be like blood doping.
Yeah,
it's kind of the opposite. Right now, I get to the top of the stairs, and I'm a little bit winded.
Wow. So it's like living in Beijing in that tent. Is that a Fox flag you've got on the peak?
Yeah, what a profound company suck-up I am, huh? It's interesting that I sucked up that hard, and you're the guy who gets the primetime show, huh?
I'd be dead if I attempted that. Mike Tobin, that is so impressive and so cool that you did that. I'm not coming with you on your next adventure, but I'm impressed that you did it. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad to be on your show when it's not such heavy content all the time. And congratulations on getting your show.
This is the after dinner mint, man. This is the happy part. Good to see you.
There you go. All right, pal.
See ya. Well, coming up, we wanted to know what the most pompous thing you heard lately was. Your answers are pouring in on Twitter. At Tucker Carlson is the address. Tucker Carlson Tonight at foxnews.com is our email. We'll read the best. There's a lot to choose from in this increasingly pompous world. Stay tuned. And now, today in Pomposity, we ask, what is the most pompous, meaning lack of self-awareness, puffed up, silly thing you've heard today? There's a lot to choose from. We got this tweet. What will the White House Correspondents' Dinner look like under President Trump? Reporters are beginning to worry. That's a tweet from the Poynter Institute. Reporters are actually worrying about the White House Correspondents' Dinner, if you can imagine. Ellen Wilder wrote this. Let me check with CNN, and I'll get back to you. Maybe the Brian Stelter program. Kyle Borgman wrote, ex-girlfriend once said that pumpkin spiced lattes are a symbol of white privilege. Ooh, so we need to find a new girlfriend, perhaps. Gret Stan wrote, anything that came out of Keith Olbermann's Twitter mouth, hands down. That is true. He's the king of that. And finally, Joseph Herbert tweeted this, Obama talking about his record and his legacy, both of which, you will not be surprised to know, he gives an A. Well, tomorrow, as you choose the news, tweet an important story to us at Tucker Carlson or email us, and we'll put it on the air. That's about it for us tonight. Tune in every night at 7 for the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Don't forget to DVR us. You can. The O'Reilly Factor is up next. Don't miss that. Great show. See you tomorrow.